That's the story of Jackie Christie, a woman once revered for her unwavering loyalty, bold personality, and fierce love for her husband, Doug Christie. Their relationship was admired by millions, portrayed on screen as the epitome of a perfect love story, one that seemed untouchable. Jackie and Doug were inseparable, their bond showcased as something unbreakable. People looked at them and thought, now that's real love. But behind every flawless image lies a shadow. And behind theirs was a truth no one saw coming. A truth that shattered that golden illusion in an instant. Today, Jackie Christie stands in a courtroom, silent and alone. Her once commanding voice now quiet, her eyes, usually burning with confidence, are clouded with fear and regret. The most shocking part? Doug Christie, the same man who once stood by her side through it all, is no longer standing with her. What happened between them? Was it betrayal? Abuse? Or something deeper, something neither of them had ever dared to speak aloud? The world only saw the headlines, Jackie Christie sentenced. Doug Christie finally speaks. But what they didn't see was the slow unraveling of a relationship that looked perfect from the outside, yet had been quietly breaking apart for years. This isn't just another celebrity scandal. It's a story of obsession, silence, and a love that lost itself somewhere in the shadows. To the public, Jackie and Doug Christie were a real-life fairy tale. From their early days on reality TV to their red carpet appearances, everything about them screamed power couple. Jackie was outspoken, fiercely protective of Doug, while Doug, soft-spoken, loyal, and devoted, stood silently by her side. They were each other's biggest fans, and people adored how Jackie seemed to guard Doug from the world, while Doug stood unwaveringly by her. Their relationship became a symbol of loyalty, of a ride-or-die commitment. Jackie often spoke about the rules they had to protect their marriage, rules like avoiding solo interactions with the opposite sex, or always traveling together. To fans, it seemed romantic, admirable even. But to those paying closer attention, something was amiss. Jackie's control over Doug's life wasn't just about love, it began to feel more like ownership. As Doug's basketball career came to an end, Jackie became more involved in every aspect of his life, from his business deals to his friendships. What he wore, who he spoke to, Jackie was everywhere, managing, directing, approving. And Doug? He didn't fight it. He stayed quiet. He stayed supportive. To him, love meant sacrifice. He gave up his space, his time, even parts of himself, to keep the peace. But that peace came at a cost. Doug stopped showing up to events unless Jackie was involved. He avoided interviews that weren't pre-approved. His social media presence began to shrink. People noticed, especially those closest to him. But no one said anything because when a couple is held up as the gold standard of love, it feels wrong to question it. The truth was, their relationship wasn't built solely on trust. It was built on control. While Jackie claimed it was just passion, Doug was slowly disappearing behind the scenes. The smile stayed on his face, but something inside him was quietly breaking. That's how it started with Doug. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He just started withdrawing little by little. His friends were the first to notice. Calls that used to come weekly became rare. He missed birthdays, canceled lunch plans, stopped replying to texts without explanation. When one of his longtime friends finally asked if everything was okay, Doug just smiled and said, "I'm busy. Jackie wants me to keep a low profile." But this low profile wasn't about privacy, it was isolation. Jackie's involvement in Doug's life became so intense that it felt as though she was breathing for him. She would speak for him in meetings, cut off conversations she didn't like, and if Doug was invited to an event, Jackie either went with him or made sure he didn't go at all. Doug stopped making decisions on his own, not because he couldn't, but because it wasn't worth the conflict anymore. People started whispering, "He doesn't look the same. He's not himself." But no one had the courage to speak up. Jackie's energy was overwhelming. She controlled every room she entered, and her confidence made people hesitate to challenge her. He faded into the background. There was one incident, never made public, where Doug was offered a coaching position at a prestigious basketball academy. It was the kind of opportunity that could have reignited his love for the game. But Jackie turned it down before Doug could even respond. "It's not the right time," she said. "It'll take too much away from us." Doug didn't argue. He just nodded as always. But that day, something inside him shifted. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was sadness. A deep, quiet sadness that came from realizing he was no longer living for himself. And that was the beginning. The slow, invisible cracks that eventually led to everything falling apart. No one expected it. Not the fans, not the media, not even the people closest to them. Then, one quiet morning, headlines flashed across every major outlet. Doug Christie files legal complaint against wife Jackie Christie. It didn't seem real. The same Doug who had defended Jackie for years, the same man who had never once let the public see a crack in their bond. Now this? The documents were vague, but loud in meaning. Emotional manipulation, financial mismanagement, isolation. Doug wasn't accusing Jackie of physical harm, but something much deeper. Something that chips away at a person over time, until there's barely anything left. According to the reports, Doug claimed he had been mentally imprisoned for years. That Jackie had monitored his every move, shut him off from friends, and used his loyalty as a weapon to keep him obedient. The news sent shockwaves. Some fans were in disbelief. Others quietly admitted they weren't surprised. Whispers from years past began to resurface, things people had noticed but ignored. Like how Jackie always answered Doug's questions in interviews. Or how he seemed quieter and more withdrawn over time. Doug didn't go on TV. He didn't do interviews. He let the paperwork speak for him. But one close friend, speaking anonymously, said, "This has been building up for years." Doug loved Jackie, but he forgot how to love himself. And Jackie? She denied it all. She posted smiling pictures, gave cryptic responses on social media, and insisted the world was misunderstanding their love. But behind the scenes, legal teams were assembling. Jackie knew, this time, silence wouldn't work in her favor. The courtroom was packed, with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Jackie walked in, dressed sharply, her expression calm, almost cold. Doug entered through a side door, eyes cast low, avoiding attention. They didn't even glance at one another as the proceedings began. A strange air filled the room, a mix of sadness, tension, and disbelief. Doug's legal team laid out a detailed timeline. They spoke of financial control, revealing that Jackie had sole access to their joint accounts for years. They showed messages in which Jackie allegedly threatened Doug's relationships with family members if he didn't follow her rules. Private recordings of heated arguments were played, arguments never meant to be heard. In those recordings, Jackie's tone shifted quickly from loving to domineering. At one point, Doug's therapist took the stand. She had been treating him for nearly 2 years. With a soft voice, she spoke about emotional dependency, how someone can live in fear without visible bruises. She explained that Doug exhibited classic signs of psychological conditioning, the kind seen in long-term emotional control cases. Jackie's team fought back, painting Doug as confused and manipulated by outside forces. They claimed he was being pressured by business partners who didn't like Jackie's influence. They described her as passionate, not controlling, assertive, not abusive. But something wasn't landing. The jury didn't seem convinced. The public? They were already beginning to take sides. For the first time in years, Doug spoke. Briefly but with clarity. "I never stopped loving her," he said. "But I stopped recognizing myself. I couldn't live like that anymore." The room went silent. After weeks of emotional testimony, the court finally reached a decision. Jackie Christie was found guilty, not of physical abuse, but of emotional coercion and financial manipulation. A charge that, while rare, had been increasingly recognized in legal systems in recent years. The judge addressed Jackie directly. "This case is not about villainy. It's about power and what happens when love becomes control." Her sentence wasn't jail time, but something more symbolic, a court-mandated separation of all financial ties, mandatory therapy, and a public apology. It was a fall from grace, but one with heavy consequences. Jackie didn't speak as the verdict was read. She looked straight ahead, her jaw clenched, tears brimming but never falling. Doug didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply stood, nodded quietly, and left the room. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed and questions were shouted, but Doug said nothing. Just one sentence. It was never about revenge. It was about healing. And that said more than any headline ever could. In the months after the case, Doug finally opened up, not in a flashy interview, but in a quiet podcast with a close friend hosting. It was the first time he spoke freely in his own voice, and what he said wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was honest. He talked about how love can blind you, about how he believed protecting Jackie meant silencing his own needs, how he thought loyalty meant saying yes, even when it hurt. "I wasn't a prisoner in my home," Doug said. "But I was a prisoner in my mind. I couldn't tell the difference between love and fear anymore." He shared how he had slowly cut ties with his family, convinced by Jackie that they didn't support their love. He gave up opportunities that could have reignited his passion for basketball, not because he didn't want them, but because Jackie didn't approve. "I lost years," he said. "Years I'll never get back. But I also learned that healing doesn't mean blaming. It means remembering who you are." His words resonated deeply, especially with men who had never spoken out about their own experiences with emotional manipulation. Doug's story wasn't just his own anymore. It became a voice for the voiceless. Jackie and Doug are no longer together. There was no big press release, no formal divorce announcement with photo ops, just silence. The kind of silence that comes when two people finally step out of a storm and go their separate ways. Jackie's public image remains complicated. Some still defend her fiercely. Others have distanced themselves. She's kept a low profile since the sentencing, appearing only occasionally with carefully worded statements about growth and misunderstanding. Doug, meanwhile, has slowly rebuilt his life. He now coaches young athletes, not just in basketball but in life. He talks openly about mental health, about emotional intelligence, about how real strength comes from vulnerability, not silence. He's not perfect, but he's present, and that to him is enough. Their story wasn't fiction, and yet it feels like a lesson from a novel. A love that began with passion and ended in silence. A warning that control can wear the mask of care. And a reminder that even the strongest seeming bonds can crack, not because there was no love, but because love, when twisted, can also trap.